All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Green, a technology accessibility training specialist with the Office of Information Technologies, Emerging Technology and Accessibility area. Our team works to ensure that all technology users, including those with disabilities, have a functional and accessible technology experience with the university's web presence and our instructional and emerging technologies. And you can find more information about who we are and what we do on our website at accessibility.ua.edu. A quick moment for housekeeping. Um, I have muted everyone by default, so we won't be disrupted by latecomers. But when you want to talk, just click the microphone icon in the bottom bar to mute or unmute yourself. You can also choose to have your camera on or off. Please do mute your microphone when you aren't speaking. When I'm talking or sharing my screen, please write in the chat box and let me know if you can't see or hear something. And finally, you're welcome to use that chat box throughout. I may not be able to watch it very closely while I'm talking, but I will do my best to check in every once in a while. And if I don't see your question or comment immediately, don't worry, I will come back to those at the end. So this slide includes a picture of me. I have my webcam turned off to preserve bandwidth, but I thought you might like to see who's speaking with you today. During today's webinar, we will look at creating Microsoft Excel spreadsheets that are accessible to people with disabilities. We will cover finding and using accessible Excel templates, using the accessibility checker to identify and fix potential accessibility issues, accessible formatting and labeling of tables, charts, and sheet tabs, and saving spreadsheets as accessible PDF documents. When we offer this session and our other Microsoft Office sessions in the classroom, it is usually in a hands-on format. Since that's difficult to do in a webinar environment, I'm going to do my best to describe what I'm doing as I do it so that if you're interested in following along with the recording later, you'll be able to do that. And I'll send you a link to that recording via email in the next few days. The email will include additional resources, including links to relevant Microsoft and other documentation. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started with our content. So by now, those of you who have been in workshops or webinars with me before have probably heard me say this several times, but it's true. The most powerful weapon in your Microsoft Office accessibility arsenal is the accessibility checker. The accessibility checker tool finds accessibility issues in your Word documents, PowerPoint presentations, Excel spreadsheets, and Outlook on the web emails. The tool generates a report of issues that could make your content difficult for people with disabilities to access and understand. And it also explains why you should fix these issues and how to fix them. We are going to use the accessibility checker to check the accessibility of an Excel spreadsheet that includes information about hotel revenue data, among other things. If you're an Office 365 user, you'll find it pretty easy to open and use the accessibility checker in Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. The screenshot on this slide shows the Review tab in the ribbon of the Office 365 version of Microsoft Excel. To open the accessibility checker, you would select the Check Accessibility button on the Review tab on that ribbon. If you have an older version of Word, Excel, or PowerPoint like I do, and you don't see the Check Accessibility button on the Review tab of the ribbon, there's some other steps you can follow to open the accessibility checker. So we're going to switch over to our spreadsheet now. So if you do have a different version of, hold on just a second, sorry, I'm not sure that my screen updated. There we go. We are looking at an Excel workbook now. If you don't have Office 365, if you have another version of Word like I do, you can follow these steps to open the accessibility checker. So you can go to File, and then Info, check for issues, And in the Check for Issues drop-down menu, you want to select Check Accessibility. The Accessibility Checker task pane will appear next to your content and show the inspection results. So after the checker inspects your content, it reports the results and it categorizes them as errors, warnings, and tips. So if people with disabilities are unable to read content in the file, the accessibility checker classifies it as an error. So I mentioned that this sheet includes information about hotel revenue. Errors in this particular sheet, sheet 1, found by the accessibility checker, include missing alt text for the picture. That's the hotel logo that reads The Landon Hotel, as well as missing alt text for the chart in this sheet. If the content in the file is difficult for people with disabilities to read, the accessibility checker will give a warning. So this sheet and this workbook as a whole has several warnings, including warnings for merged cells and default sheet names. When there's content that people with disabilities can read, but you might be able to better organize it or present it in a better way that can improve their experience, the checker may offer you additional tips. Those are not visible in this particular case. The thing I really like about the accessibility checker is that it doesn't just tell you where there's a problem and why the problem presents an accessibility barrier. It also tells you how to fix it. So for example, I'm selecting the error on sheet 1 for default sheet names. At the bottom of the accessibility checker pane, some additional information is presented. So we are told that we need to fix this because, and I'm reading now from Why Fix, default sheet names like sheet 1 make navigation through the workbook more difficult for people with disabilities. And the checker goes on to tell us that in order to fix this, we need to provide sheet names that provide information about what is found on the sheet and remove blank sheets. To rename a sheet, it tells us we can right-click on the Sheet tab and choose Rename Sheet, type in a brief name that's descriptive of the sheet contents. I'm not going to do that right this second because we'll be coming back to it momentarily. But I hope that you have an idea of how the accessibility checker works, bringing up a panel in the right sidebar that lists errors, warnings, and tips, explaining why those are important or why they create barriers, and then walking you through how to solve them. The checker isn't going to catch every single accessibility issue. No automated tool can, but it is a really great resource. Most of the issues that present barriers to access in Microsoft Office, including those identified by the accessibility checker, can be prevented or fixed by following just a few simple practices that we're going to look at now. So you can enhance the accessibility of your Office content by using built-in styles and templates with fonts and colors that are easy to see. And Microsoft offers a collection of templates that help you make your content accessible to everyone. And these templates use accessibility features provided by Windows and Office and have things like better color contrast, large font size, headings in logical format. Specifically in the Excel accessibility templates, some of the features are workbook descriptions in the A1 cell, and other input messages that are read out loud by screen readers to help users understand how a particular workbook can be used. There's several other accessibility features present in those templates as well. So you can find these templates by going to office.com and searching for accessible templates, or you can get to them from within your Office application. We're going to do that from within Excel now. So I'm back in Excel. Here I'm going to go to the File menu and select New in order to create a new Excel workbook. Here I'm going to search for the word accessible in the Search for Online Templates box. I'll retrieve quite a few of those. You can see some of them presented here. I think the selection is actually somewhat overwhelming. And a challenge that I've had is kind of figuring out, what exactly about this templates are accessible, who decided it was accessible. So one way I kind of like to get started learning about template accessibility in Office is to explore a collection of templates called the Accessible Template Sampler. And this is something you can find in Word and PowerPoint and Excel. So I'm going to change my search a little bit and search for Accessible Sampler instead. And here we have a collection of accessible templates that have actually been pulled together by Microsoft. And Microsoft describes them as providing a quick glance at a few accessible templates available for Excel. So I'm going to click on the Create button to open that up. And the way this is organized is that you get a sampling of accessible templates on each sheet tab. So we have a sheet tab for calendars where you can download templates there, a sheet tab for invoice templates, budget, calculators, and more. So if you haven't used these before, this is how I would suggest getting started, just because it brings the templates together all in one spot. I actually have this pinned on my Excel home screen to make it easy to come back to. You can also make your content in your Excel spreadsheets easier to navigate by giving all sheet tabs unique names and removing blank sheets. And this is especially important for screen reader users and those who use assistive technology, like a switch or a mouth stick to access and control the computer. And because I'm going to refer to assistive technology, particularly screen readers, several times, I'll just give a brief explanation of what I'm talking about. So a screen reader is a software program that converts digital text into synthesized speech, enabling users with visual disabilities to hear content and navigate with the keyboard. Screen readers are also sometimes used by people with certain cognitive or learning disabilities. Sometimes folks will use screen readers or text-to-speech functionality simply because they prefer audio content over text or learn better by hearing content read aloud while they're reading the digital text. In the Excel environment, screen readers read sheet names, which provide information about what is found on a worksheet, making it easier to understand the contents of the workbook and to navigate through them. So when your sheet tabs in Excel don't have unique names or your workbook has blank sheets, screen reader users have to progress through all of the content from beginning to end. It's kind of like having to listen to an automated phone menu in which all of the choices get presented to you one by one before you're allowed to make a selection. Descriptive sheet tabs and removing blank sheets is also important for people who have limited or no movement in their hands and arms and use wands, sticks, or switches to access the computer. So without descriptive sheet tab names or when blank sheets are present, these users may have to tap dozens of times just to access the content that they're interested in. So I'm back in the workbook now, and in order to make this workbook easier to navigate, we need to rename the sheet tabs that have generic names and delete blank sheets. I'm going to do that now. So to rename a sheet tab, you can right-click on that sheet tab. In this case, I'm right-clicking on Sheet 1 and choose Rename. You'll then be prompted to enter in, or you'll then have the ability to enter in a more descriptive name. This sheet presents information about 2014 hotel revenues, so I might label it something like 2014 revenues, depending on kind of the context in which it's found. So sheet 1 now has a more descriptive name. You might have noticed that that error was removed in the accessibility checker. Sheet 2 happens to be completely blank, so we need to remove it. You can remove a sheet by right-clicking on it and choosing delete, and then delete again. So already that has made it easier for people with disabilities to go directly to the content that they are interested in. There's several other things you can do to improve the navigability of your Excel workbooks. Giving your workbooks descriptive file names makes it easier for everyone, but especially people with disabilities, to locate, open, and switch between files. So the accessibility checker doesn't check this. It kind of requires a human to tell if a file name is sufficiently descriptive of the file and its purpose. But it's pretty easy to check. So you can look at the file name in the title bar in Excel, or in the File Explorer on Windows, or Finder on a Mac. And to rename the file without creating a new copy, you can close it and then select it and choose rename. And I have some examples here on this slide of non-descriptive file names. So a non-descriptive file name would be something like Untitled 1, Book 1, Application. A more descriptive file name, again, is going to include information about what can be found within. Is it a report? Was it produced on a particular date? And so on. You can also enhance the navigability of your Excel content by using a simple spreadsheet structure and table structure and specifying column header information. So screen readers keep track of their location in spreadsheets and tables by counting cells. If a cell is merged or split, or if a table is nested within another table, the screen reader may lose count and not be able to provide helpful information after that point. As part of your simple table structure, you should avoid using blank cells for formatting. Blank cells could mislead someone using a screen reader into thinking that there's nothing more in the table. If you need space between areas to assist sighted users in navigating the worksheet, you might add that space by increasing the row height or column width. So let's look at some examples of these. Our hotel revenue sheet includes some blank cells, actually entirely blank rows for formatting. So to delete those, we might select them, which I'm doing with my mouse now, right-click on them, and then choose Delete. You can also delete rows on the Home tab in the Cells group. Microsoft Office generally has several different ways to accomplish the same accomplish the same task. And I'm a right clicker, so I'm tending to choose that. But regardless of what method you use, you want to delete those blank rows, of which we have several. As for the blank rows at the bottom, you might consider alerting screen reader users when they have reached the end of the worksheet by typing end of worksheet and column A after the last row of data on the worksheet. So, here it might be something like end of worksheet in row 10 of column A. Some folks don't like how that looks and will hide that information using a white font. That's okay. You can do that. It will be still picked up by assistive technology users. However, I recommend if you add that information, leaving it visible to everyone, because there are others who may benefit from that as well. For the benefit of sighted users, some Excel spreadsheet authors also choose to hide unused columns and rows. So to hide columns, you would select the first blank column to the right of your data. And a shortcut to select all the columns to the right is to hold down the Shift and Control keys and then press the right arrow key. And that will select all of the columns to the right. You can then right-click in that selected area and choose Hide. Same goes for the rows at the bottom. So select everything that you want to hide by selecting the row, Shift, Control, and then the down arrow key, right-clicking in the selected area and choosing Hide. And that just makes it a little easier for a visual user to know that this is all of the data present in the spreadsheet, that they don't have to scroll down or over to the right to access additional data. Assistive technology users also need to be able to identify column headers and data tables so they can understand the association between the table cells and their respective headers. So when working with tables in Excel, you need to add headers to new tables and use headers in existing tables. So when you first create a table, you have the option of using your own first row of data as a header row by checking the My Table Has Headers option. So I'm going to create a table from the data on this sheet. So I'm selecting the cells I want to include in the table. On the Insert tab, I'm selecting Table. And in the Create Table dialog, which I'll drag over to make a little bit easier to see, I'm making sure that My Table Has Headers is checked, then selecting OK. So Excel then creates a header row with the data in my table. I'm switching sheets now to a table I previously created, and this existing table lacks headers. Which I know because the accessibility checker brought it to my attention, but I can also tell because up here in the table tools design area, the header row box is not checked. So to specify a header row in a block of cells that's already been marked as a table, you can place your cursor anywhere in the table, and then in the table tools design tab, check that header row box. So Excel will then add default header names like column 1, column 2, and so on. If I wanted to include this table in my spreadsheet, I would need to change the default column name so they matched up with the data in my table. So for example, change column 1 to location, column 2 to January, and so on, and then delete this row 2. Otherwise, Excel will mistakenly see that information as part of the data. Another basic principle of digital accessibility is ensuring links make sense out of context by avoiding phrases like click here and more as link text. And this is especially important because screen reader users often navigate from link to link, skipping the text in between, or use a keyboard shortcut to bring up a list of all the links present on the page and navigate the content that way. So my sheet, which I'm switching back to now, includes a couple of hyperlinks that point to the same destination. A page on the WebAIM website, so WebAIM is the organization that puts out the website, that includes a checklist to assist people in creating web pages that meet Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. So all of the links on this sheet actually point to the same thing. The first link reads checklist. So if you saw this link out of context, you probably wouldn't understand what's it for or what clicking it will do. So I gave you a little background information. This link goes to an online checklist. But if you didn't have that background information, it wouldn't be clear whether this link led to another tab in the sheet, if it led to something online, if it led to a document online that might start downloading, or even perhaps an online form or video or audio content. So a more accessible approach would be to add descriptive hyperlink text. So what you want to do when adding a link is, if Excel generates for you automatically, you can right-click it, choose Edit Hyperlink, and then in the space for text to display, you just want to do something a little more descriptive. In this case, I might say something like WebAIM, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines Checklist, or Web Content Accessibility Guidelines Checklist on the WebAIM website. And that's going to give the person using the spreadsheet just a little more context about what the link is for and what clicking it will do. The second option is actually the URL to the page itself. Generally speaking, you want to avoid using URLs themselves as link text. They're kind of unwieldy for screen reader users, so it's best to use descriptive text instead. So again, same thing, I would right click here, choose edit hyperlink, and instead of displaying the URL itself, I would name it something more descriptive. Another way you might approach this is to add descriptive hyperlink text at the time that you add the link. So this row 4, cell A, includes the URL, so I'm going to select it, and then right-click in that cell and choose hyperlink. I will put the URL in the address field instead of the text to display field, and here add more descriptive text. Again, something like WebAIM checklist would be more descriptive. This is my preferred approach for ensuring links make sense out of context. Another technique that people will sometimes use is adding a screen tip. And a screen tip is a small window that displays descriptive text when you rest the pointer over the hyperlink. I'll add one now for the link I just added. So I'll start by selecting that cell. I'll right-click in the cell and choose Edit Hyperlink. And then I'll select the screen tip button. In the screen tip text box, I would type the text of the screen tip I want to display. So this checklist on the WebAIM website helps website authors meet web content accessibility guidelines. And then I'll say okay. Okay. So after the screen tip is added, when I hover my pointer over the mouse, that screen tip will appear. So the text I entered, this checklist on the WebAIM website helps website authors meet web content accessibility guidelines appears. So this can be an effective approach if you're sure that your intended audience will be viewing the content in Excel. However, screen tips aren't preserved when you save spreadsheets as PDFs, and they may not be preserved when you convert Excel spreadsheets to other formats. Since you can only be sure that the screen tip works in the Microsoft Office environment, I think it's best to play it safe and make your actual link text descriptive rather than relying on those screen tips. All visual content in your Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, Outlook emails, and PowerPoint presentations should have alt text. And this includes pictures, clip art, smart art, graphics, shapes, groups, charts, pivot tables, objects, ink, videos, everything visual. So alternative text or alt text helps users understand what's important in images and other visuals. Screen readers speak the alternative text in place of images, allowing the content and the function of the image to be accessible to those with visual or certain cognitive disabilities. So alt text will also be displayed in place of an image in browsers if an image file is not loaded or if the user has chosen not to view images. And it can also be read by search engines. So I'm switching back to our sheet now, to our tab with information about revenues. And the image and chart on this sheet are both lacking alternative text. So to add alt text to an image, I would right click on it, which I'm doing now for the logo of the Landon Hotel. You would then select Format Picture, then Layout and Properties, and enter a description. I recommend only putting text in the description field and leaving the title blank. I'm going to go ahead and add that text now, Landon Hotel. Putting alt text in the description field will provide the best experience with most major screen readers. Content in the description field is also converted to alt text when a PDF is exported from Excel, whereas content in the title field may not be. So I'll go ahead and add that. And that information is added as alt text. The process is similar for adding alt text to a chart. So you can right click on the chart, in this case the first quarter revenues chart, choose Format Chart Area. In the chart options, choose Layout and Properties, and then type a description and a title. For this case, I'm going to describe what the chart is and what it's trying to convey. The assistive technology user can access the actual chart data itself, so I don't need to replicate that data within the alt text, but I just might provide enough information for someone to know if that data is worth accessing, whether the chart information is useful to them. So I'm going to describe it as a clustered column chart for data comparing monthly revenue across hotel locations. And after that description is added, that error will be removed from the accessibility checker pane. I'm returning to the table that we already did a little work on to make more accessible. So this is the existing table that we added headers to. We also need to add alt text to the table. So to add alt text to a table, you want to right click that table, and select Table Properties. Whoops. Oh, sorry. I have my zoom pretty high, so I'm having a hard time selecting the entire table. Right click the table, choose Table Properties. Not sure why I'm having trouble selecting that. Oh, Table, and then alternative text. Sometimes there's another submenu. It's Table, then Properties, and then alternative text. So in this case, Table, alternative text, and then here again we can enter a description. I'm changing to another sheet now. This sheet has University of Alabama financial information, or it is the beginning of a sheet containing University of Alabama financial information. This sheet also includes the Script A University logo as a purely decorative touch. So sometimes there's nothing really important to say about an image. And you can indicate that to a screen reader by adding what's known as null alt text. So you would open the alt text dialog as you did with the other images to Format Picture, Layout, and Properties. But in this case, instead of writing a textual description, you would type in 2 double quotes with no space between them, quote, quote. And now the screen reader will ignore this picture. And if you save this sheet as a PDF document, such images can be tagged as artifacts using Adobe Acrobat. So we've added null alt text to tell the screen reader that this is purely decorative. Another impactful practice across the Microsoft Office and web environment is ensuring that color is not the only means of conveying important information. And this is primarily to ensure your content is accessible to people who have color vision deficiency, sometimes called color blindness, but it's also a principle of universal design for learning. By using more than just color to convey information, you're providing multiple means of representation or multiple ways that the person viewing this could pick up on the information. There's an instance in our sheet or in our workbook where color alone is used to convey meaning. So I'm switching to the Color tab, which lists information about notable halftime shows presented by the Million Dollar Band. So in this case, red font color is used to indicate Million Dollar Band shows that include signature songs. The people who are blind, have low vision, or have color vision deficiency might miss out on the meaning conveyed by the red color alone. There are a couple other ways we might present this information. One might be to add an additional column for signature shows and indicating signature songs and indicating whether a show included a signature song there, so there's actual data in the table that can be perceived. Another way might be to use the built-in styles. So while visual manual formatting like font weight or color or cell background color is largely inaccessible to people who use screen readers, cell styles is a more accessible alternative. So a cell style is a defined set of formatting characteristics like fonts and font sizes, number formats, cell borders, cell shading, that you can apply or modify. So we can see some of those cell styles here up in the Home tab of the Excel ribbon in the Styles group. So instead of using red font color, what I might do is select this information and modify a style appropriately. So I can do that by selecting the More option and then choosing New Cell Style. I can create a new cell style from scratch. So I could call it, signature shows or signature, and then format that the way I wish it to appear. Includes general information or text. I'm fine with the alignment. The font, I want to be red. I'm okay with the font size. I don't wish to have a border or fill or protection, and I'll go ahead and choose OK. And then apply that signature style. So the visual effect is the same. The text turns red. However, instead of just having visual formatting, there's actual underlying markup that would indicate to an assistive technology user that special formatting is applied. And a screen reader would read this aloud by saying something like name, signature, description, text, red, bottom aligned. You also want to use sufficient contrast for text and background colors. If your document has a high level of contrast between text and background, more people can see and use the content. So just visually scanning the sheet, I can see some text that's particularly hard to read due to insufficient contrast. I'm using a lighter gray on a white background. There are a few different ways that you can pick up on and repair insufficient contrast. The accessibility checker will look for this, so that's one way. There are also some accessibility checkers that you can use to check your color combinations. One that my group really likes is the WebAIM color contrast checker. That's an online tool where you can enter in color codes for foreground and background, and it will tell you whether or not there's sufficient contrast. There's another tool that you download and install on your computer called Color Contrast Analyzer, where you can also specify color codes, or you can use an eyedropper tool to select colors on your screen and check the contrast combination. In the follow-up email, I'll send links to both of those so you can check them out. Another way that you can check color contrast is very low tech, and that is printing out your content, in this case a spreadsheet, in grayscale and seeing if there's sufficient contrast there. Let's move on to talking about how to save Excel spreadsheets as accessible PDFs. So the first step in creating an accessible PDF from a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet is to ensure that the original Excel file is accessible. The accessibility of the PDF depends on the accessibility of the source file. And creating a source file that's accessible from the start or correcting the accessibility issues in the source file is much easier than fixing the resulting PDF. Plus, any errors you fix in the source file only have to be fixed once. So I corrected the accessibility errors in the hotel revenue sheet and saved it as a PDF. And this is the resulting PDF. I have the tag panel open in the left sidebar, the Adobe Acrobat tag panel. And although there's a bit more to it than this, when people talk about accessible PDF files, they're usually referring to PDF files that have tags. And tags are really the basis of an accessible PDF file. They indicate the structure of the document, communicate the order in which items should be read, and determine exactly which items will be read. So in this case, in our document, we do have some tags that are present, and we have a table and a figure. And if I open up each of those tags, there's several additional tags that kind of fall under those in the hierarchy. So table row is tagged as a row, table data is tagged as datal, and so on. For our figure, the figure as a whole is tagged as a figure, and then we have several tags kind of falling under that as well. So these tags are the way that assistive technology user knows what's present in the document and can access the content. When creating a PDF from a Microsoft Excel sheet, you want to do so in a way that preserves the accessibility of the source file and includes these tags. So switching back to the sheet I used to create the PDF. And again, most of the accessibility issues have been corrected. All the ones that I am able to correct in Excel itself have been corrected. I'm going to save it as a PDF now. So if you have Adobe Acrobat on your computer, you'll want to use PDF Maker to create PDFs from Microsoft Office files. And when the PDF Maker add-in is enabled, a tab called Acrobat will appear in the ribbon, alongside other tabs like Home, Insert, Data, and so on. I'm clicking that tab now. This is what you'll want to use when generating a PDF document from your source files. So when you click on the Acrobat tab, it shows you all of the options available within the PDF Maker. I'm going to select the Preferences button. These are settings that are going to be used to generate the PDF file. There's a lot of options here, even more under advanced settings. I'm not going to go into any more detail about those, except to point out one checkbox, and that is the Enable Accessibility and Reflow with Tagged Adobe PDF checkbox. You want this to be checked so that all those steps you took to make your spreadsheet accessible, alt text, header rows, sheet names, and so on are preserved when you save it as a PDF. You shouldn't have to go through this process every single time. Once you've set it in Excel once, that preference should be maintained. But you may want to check this out the next time you save something as a PDF from Excel. Make sure that box is checked. Once you've done that, you can click OK, and that now defines the preferences for how the PDF file will be created. To make the PDF file, I'm going to click on the Create PDF button, and I'm going to leave the conversion range as is, which is just the single sheet that I'd like to change to a PDF. But I am going to change this option to have that sheet fit to paper width. This isn't an accessibility preference. It's just to sort of specify what I want to appear on the PDF. And now I'll select Convert to PDF. And then I will save this, Landon. Hotel revenues, actually I already have one. That's the one we were looking at a second ago, so I'll add the number 2 and then choose Save. And this is the PDF that was created as a result of that process. Once you've created a PDF, there's typically a few touch-ups that need to be done to make it fully accessible. I'm not going to outline all of those. I'll send you some information about that. And if you'd like to learn more, we are offering PDF workshops and webinars later this summer. One thing I will point out is that Acrobat has two built-in tools to help you create accessible PDFs, and that's the Accessibility Checker and the Make Accessible action. The Make Accessible action walks you through the steps required to make a PDF accessible. So you can access this a couple different ways: in the right sidebar through the Action Wizard, or in the toolbar at the top of the screen, going to Tools and choosing Actions or Action Wizard. In the Actions list, you would select Make Accessible, and the Action Wizard would walk you through those steps. So it prompts you to address accessibility issues like missing document descriptions or titles, and it looks for common elements that need further action, like scanned text, taking scanned image-only PDFs and converting them to text with actual PDFs with actual readable text in them. It also looks at form fields, labels, tables, and images. So Make Accessible Wizard will kind of walk you through the process of creating an accessible document. The other tool, and this is what I would use in the workflow that I just did. So I'm working with an Excel spreadsheet that I created. I have control over fixing accessibility issues in the source document. Instead of using that action, I would use the accessibility checker within Acrobat. So I would select accessibility and then full check. I usually stick with the default options, but there are several different things you can change here, and then start checking. And like the accessibility checker in Microsoft Excel, the accessibility checker in Acrobat opens up a sidebar where it identifies errors or warnings and issues. So you can choose which accessibility problems to look for and how you want the results reported. But some of the things that have come up in this particular document, content saved from Office almost always fails title for whatever reason. Even if you've indicated a title in the metadata of your Office documents, that title just doesn't get passed along to Excel. So that's a quick fix. You'll right click and choose Fix, and then type in a title. Landon Hotel Revenues 2014. And click OK, and the error goes away. The title now passes. These aren't errors, but really sort of alerts that you need to check the logical reading order and the color contrast. Tables, I did the best I could within Excel itself to make sure my tables were indicated by indicating where headers were and where the data was. However, there's some additional touch-up that needs to be done here in Acrobat. We'll talk about this in the PDF workshop, but I want to point out to those of you who may not be able to attend that if you right-click on any one of these errors, you can choose Explain, and that will lead you to the relevant documentation on the Adobe website that explains why this is necessary. So in this case, headers for accessibility, it's necessary that all tables in the PDF have a header, a summary, and then steps for addressing those things. So how to, in this case, open up the tag panel and inspect and manually fix those header tags. So in conclusion, the university is committed to providing technology users, especially those with disabilities, a functional, accessible technology experience. And whether we are designing a website or writing a Microsoft Word document, or in this case, working with data in Excel, we all make choices that create accessibility or create disability. through those design choices. So moving forward, I would just encourage you all to take what you learned here today, apply that, and create accessibility. We're here to help you. You can visit us at accessibility.ua.edu. That's all I have. If you have questions or thoughts to share, please feel free to unmute your mic and share them now, or type them in the chat box.